Want to start you with the news, though, that came out of Lincoln yesterday afternoon as Nebraska announced that it is restructuring the contract of football coach Scott Frost. He will be staying in Lincoln for at least another season. That is today's big story, and certainly you are well aware of Frost and the struggles at Nebraska, but AD Trev Alberts announced Frost will be back next year. He agreed to a pay cut and a lower buyout. Would have been owed $20 million had Nebraska fired him. The former Nebraska QB, 15-27 as the Huskers coach, has yet to beat a ranked team, but they have been close to breaking through this year. 4 losses by a combined 22 points to teams that were in the top 10 at game time. Alberts saying, quote, "We all recognize our record has not been what anyone wants it to be. I've been clear that I've been looking for incremental progress, and I have seen that in several key areas this season. Our team has continued to compete at a high level, and the young men in our program have remained unified and shown great resiliency, which is an important reflection of the leadership of Coach Frost and his staff." Mitch Sherman covers Nebraska for The Athletic now, and he is joining us. Mitch, let's start with this. How is this being received in Nebraska? Mitch, you got me?
I'm here, Dave. I can hear you.
Yeah. How is this news being received in Nebraska?
Pretty positively. I would say there was more. There were more fans, more on the side of keeping Scott Frost in this situation than there were on the other side of Nebraska making a change. People are tired at Nebraska of going through the cycle of removing coaches after 4 years, after 3 years, as it was with Scott Frost's predecessor, Mike Riley. So despite the lack of winning, Scott Frost is, of course, 15-27 in his 4th season at Nebraska. There definitely was an appetite to keep him for another year and to see, with some change on that offensive staff, if he can make this thing work in year 5.
From Trev's point of view, how much of this do you think was about finances?
I think it was an important factor, and you see that in the way that Scott Frost's contract was restructured. Trev Alberts said he wanted to feel uncomfortable. He wanted Scott Frost to feel uncomfortable in this situation that he coaches in next year. So the salary goes down by $1 million to $4 million. I know that is enough to live on in Lincoln.
It's straight by. Yeah.
And then the buyout is cut in half, which is significant. It would have been $20 million after this season if Frost had been let go before the end of the year. $15 million in 2022. It's now going to be $7.5 million. So Scott Frost is showing that he truly wants to be the coach at Nebraska. He could have walked with $20 million if he wasn't willing to take this restructured contract. As it stands now, if he coaches another season and it doesn't work out, he's only going to get about 58% of that at $11.5 million with his contract and the buyout. So he's making a commitment to Nebraska in addition to Nebraska doing so to him.
Now, you did mention that this came with the firing of some offensive assistants, including offensive coordinator Matt Lubick. It's interesting. I mean, you look through the stats, and I mean, look, all the stats are kind of confounding with this team, other than, turnovers are an issue and special teams have been really bad. But I mean, statistically, this is not a bad football team, but they're second in the Big Ten in total offense, Mitch. I realize there have been some empty yards in there and hasn't always translated to scoring, but they're 4th in the Big Ten in scoring as well. So, I mean, it's not like they're an inept offense by any stretch. What is the rationale, do you believe, for kind of putting all of the blame, at least in terms of the changes that were made, on the offensive staff?
Yeah, Dave, 28 points a game, more than 6.5 yards per game. These are solid numbers in the Big Ten. And with the schedule that Nebraska has played going against Oklahoma in the non-conference, really, Scott Frost wanted a fresh view of this offense. Nebraska has had some problems retaining offensive talent at the receiver position, at the running back position, and there is young talent in the room that Nebraska needs to be able to bring back. I think there was some concern perhaps with the lack of progress among some young players, if that could stay in place for next year. And now at least there will be a new leadership, a new coordinator, new quarterbacks coach. We'll see where that goes with Adrian Martinez down the road. But at the end of the day, someone needed to take the fall for this, and it wasn't going to be Scott Frost. This was his pitch to Trev Alberts on how he was going to make things better. He was going to revamp his offensive coaching staff, and he's gotten rid of everyone except tight ends coach Sean Beckton. So that is certainly a reboot and revamp, and we'll see what Nebraska wants to do with its scheme, the way it's going to call plays. And if it's going to hire a special teams coordinator, a dedicated special teams coach with one of these openings that it has now because of the firings on the offensive side.
You mentioned Adrian Martinez. It is a fascinating story because when he is good, he can be so good, but he has had all kinds of turnover issues in his career. He has another year because of COVID last year. He could come back. What's your sense of whether or not he might choose to do that?
Well, a couple things to keep in mind. One, Adrian is very close with Mario Verduzco. Mario made the first call to Adrian when they were leaving UCF in 2017. He's the quarterback's coach who's out of a job as of Monday night. So I think that will impact Adrian's decision, whatever he decides to do after this season, if it's to come back and be a fifth-year starter, potentially a fourth-year captain. And Adrian has graduated. He graduated in May of this year. So he would be 3 semesters after graduation if he were to come back in 2022. I think the most popular sentiment in Nebraska is that people need to see Scott Frost in his 5th season without Adrian Martinez to get a true sense of what Scott and his coaches can do with this offense. Now, that may be easier said than done. There's plenty of incentive for Adrian Martinez to come back, some of which includes name, image, and likeness, which has never been a consideration as players go through this process that he'll face after this season. So it needs to be taken into account. It's obviously one of the most significant decisions that Nebraska faces, that one of its players or coaches face in the offseason is whether Adrian Martinez is back in 2022. My sense, if I had to pick right now, is that they're going to go in different directions, and Nebraska's going to have a different quarterback next season. All
right, so it's possible it's someone who's already on the roster, or it's possible you go into the portal. Recruiting is not going well, Mitch. I mean, they are ranked last in the Big Ten right now in recruiting, as you know. There's no 4 or 5-star commitments. There's some in-state players who have chosen to go elsewhere, highly recruited players. How much of this is going to be worked through recruiting and trying to reinforce that class over the next couple months? And frankly, how much of it is just going to be, hey, we need to win and we need to win right now, and that's about the portal?
Well, they've got 5 weeks or so until the early signing period, and then several weeks after that until February to be able to pad this class. Nebraska's not going to sign a big class unless that changes because of some attrition that occurs as a result of these changes within the offensive coaching staff. If there are all kinds of transfers here at the end of November and into December, then I think the number that Nebraska is targeting with its recruiting class might go up from that 13 to 15 that they're looking at right now. But they've got 9 commitments, and as you mentioned, not one guy who's ranked in the top 500 nationally. It's been a struggle for Nebraska. Definitely the losing has contributed to prospects wanting to look elsewhere. And it started at home, as you mentioned, Dave, in this 2022 class with players out of the Omaha area who have gone to the SEC and the Big 12 and the Pac-12. So that's really disappointing. And it's always been, the foundation for Nebraska in recruiting is to lock up those in-state players. They are going to look to the portal. It's going to be a focus for Nebraska in this offseason, probably more so in building the talent with guys who are able to help right away than through the recruiting class. But, recruiting remains essential, as it does for any program anywhere in the country. You've got to be able to go out and be attractive to high school players. And they may also look a bit at the junior colleges getting into December.
Mitch, you see the record at Nebraska. Everyone knows the history and how great this program has been through the years. What do Nebraska fans expect out of this program? I mean, this is so far below anything that anyone would have thought of as Nebraska football, even as recently as 10 years ago. And yet, kind of here we are, bringing back a coach who's 15 and 27. What do Nebraskans want out of this program? What do they think is realistic out of this program?
Yeah, it's not losing by 9 points against Ohio State, 7 against Oklahoma, 3 against Michigan and Michigan State. Those in and of themselves are okay. I think there's signs of progress, but when you have all of them in 1 year and then the losses to Illinois, Minnesota, and Purdue, that obviously is not what Nebraska wants. What it wants is a team that isn't just competitive, but that wins games and that wins some of those close games. Nebraska's 5-18 in the one-score margins under Scott Frost. That does not include the game last Saturday, which was very competitive against the Buckeyes in Lincoln. So they want to compete. They want to have a chance to win a Big Ten West title and then go from there. It's not 12 wins. It's not 11 wins. It's not the college football playoff. It's being in contention in their own division, playing these November games against Wisconsin and Iowa, as Nebraska will do on November 20th and November 26th, and to have them mean something for what's ahead in December and to get to a bowl game, which hasn't happened since 2016. I think that is the absolute minimum standard, the minimum expectation for Scott Frost in year 5.
Mitch, this has been fascinating. Really, really good to talk to you, and we'll catch up with you again soon. And look who's here. It's Wani.
Hi, Mitch.
Thanks, Dave. Hello, Dave.
All right. Thanks, Mitch. Here is the statement from Coach Scott Frost. He said, I appreciate the confidence Trev Alberts has shown in me to continue to lead this program. I love this state, this football program. Honored and humble for the opportunity to serve as the head coach at my alma mater. Our immediate focus is on the 2 games ahead against Wisconsin and Iowa and the opportunity in front of us to build momentum heading into the offseason in 2022. I understand we've not won at a high enough level, but I'm confident our football program will continue to take steps forward. And Dave Wanstead joins me now.
Like it or not,
yeah.
I'm here.
Okay, so what do you make of all this?
You know, I don't like it. I'm going to reference Coach Lou Holtz. I mean, he said, I remember hearing him 20 years ago, he said, hey, if the head coach starts firing assistants that have been loyal to him and have worked with him and he is hired, he says, you're usually the next one to go. I mean, I just don't like the timing of it. And now, if you're an assistant coach, how excited are you to leave your job, if you've got a good job, and move your family to Lincoln to see if Scott Frost can turn this around in 1 year?
Yeah, that's going to be challenging.
He's going to get coaches
staff
that are out of work. Yeah. He's not going to get any top assistants to go. I mean, I'm disappointed.
It's going to be, well, I mean, unless they're willing to guarantee some contracts and say,
they'll give them 2 years.
You get a couple years, and still, no, it's
still not good situation. I don't like the timing of it. I liked Scott Frost. I was a fan of his, but this bothers me.
It's a tough spot. Okay. Interested in your thoughts on the CFP rankings. Those come out tonight.
Wow.
From a coach's point of view, like, how much do you focus on this?
You know what? You do. You have to. I mean, obviously, you're tracking it, but the thing that just jumps at me after seeing the games last week, seeing, you know, who's not just who's winning, who's dropping out, but how close these games are. Rever, other than Georgia, if this season doesn't push the committee to expand the playoffs to whatever number, then it never will. Because right now, I mean, you could be the 10th team, the 8th team, and you would have a chance, in my opinion, the way these games have played out, as close as they've been, you would have a chance, legitimate chance, to win the whole ball west.
You'd certainly have a chance to be in the championship game.
Absolutely.
Right now,
you would.
You know, whether or not can Cincinnati beat Georgia, you know, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd like to.
Recent history tells us maybe they can.
If you're at Cincinnati, you'd like that shot.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I hear you. I certainly think that it is up in the air to enough of an extent that you make the argument to expand. And it's clear it's going to expand. I think the number is just, is it 8, is it 12? And that's kind of where the debate is. But this year, I think we already had momentum for it, and I think this year we'll reinforce that. I'm really interested in your take on Michigan State. I'd love to pick your brain on coaching, right? And so you're Mel Tucker, and you have this team that's exceeded expectations, maybe not internally, maybe you thought you could be this team, but certainly externally, and now all of a sudden you've hit your first bump in the road. What do you say to kind of get this team back this week?
Well, I would say this. I think 2 things are going on here. Then I want to get into this shortly on the X and O's, because this bothered me. Losing like this, how can you be second in the Big Ten in sacks and last in the country in giving up passing yards? I mean, there's something that's missing. So I came in this morning and went through the game again right here and just watched defense only to see. But I think the emotional part of Michigan State, he's done such a great job of getting the players to come in under the portal system, right?
Yep.
I mean, Kenneth Walker III, I mean, there's several of them that are winning games for him. They did not come up through the Michigan State ranks. They have not heard week after week, we got to beat Michigan. We got, you know what I mean? So last week was a big game. These transfer portal players are having more success and more people pat them on the back than they've ever had. You know, and so he's got, you know, now this individual is getting credit here and this individual is getting, so he's got to reel it in, I think, to some of the playmakers that he has and get them back focused on track to say, hey, we got several more games. We still have a goal. I mean, because there's been so much success so fast by players that really, I don't want to say aren't his guys, but transferred in, you know, and you're dealing with a guy, you're just getting to know these young kids and their personalities. And there's a lot happened in a great way in a fast, short amount of time. And I think it's a big challenge for him.
Yeah, no doubt. Ohio State coming up here in 2 weeks, not this week, but the week after for Michigan State. Interesting that as Michigan State has kind of floundered on defense, Ohio State's offense isn't where it was a couple of weeks ago. How concerned are you about the Buckeyes getting things back on track here?
The only thing is the red zone. And I know everybody's talking about that, but 2 touchdowns in 9 trips the last 2 weeks. And the one thing that I would like to see, and Ryan Day is as good as there is on offense. I mean, when you get in the red zone, and I've studied this, the 2 things you have to do, number 1 is you got to run the ball. And they'll make an attempt to run the ball. There's no question about that. And they will run the ball. But the other thing you got to do when you get down there and it's all tight, average players, okay, all of a sudden there's not as much space to cover. Yeah. Average players become a little better in the red zone. So what do? You got to move the quarterback. You got to move the quarterback some, which what does that do to the defense? If the receivers are moving, they know where they're going. Quarterback knows where he's going. But as a defender, I don't. But if I've got to move my whole coverage with the play, if you follow me.
Yep.
And that's when, if everybody doesn't do it in uniform, all of a sudden 2 of us move and this guy doesn't, there's a big passing lane in there. So that's and C.J. Stroud, I mean, he's run for 5 yards all year. I mean,
well, it's obvious they don't want him to get hurt, right?
Oh, come on.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
I'm just saying, right? Like,
but
I hear you.
Sound like an athletic director or somebody. Don't let him get hurt.
Well,
we're trying to, you know, because when I think, you know, they're going to have to move him, and he's going to have to make some plays on his feet.
I hear you. Look, I mean,
that's how you improve in the red zone.
And he can move. He's a good athlete.
Yes.
There's no question he's a good athlete.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about running.
Reverend,
there's a difference, and I want, you know, our viewer. I'm not talking about necessarily running the quarterback RPO where he's going to run. I'm talking about moving the pocket, get him out of a sprint out where he does have a run-pass option, but the ball can come out quicker. I just think it may be a little spark for him to help him.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Back on Big Ten today and more on Nebraska, bringing back Scott Frost, as we said. Look, the record is undeniably bad, but the underlying numbers are quite respectable, as we were talking about with Mitch. They've outscored their opponents by more than a touchdown per game. All 7 losses by single digits. They're second in the Big Ten in total offense. They get a lot of it in big chunks, tied for first in the nation in plays of 60 yards or longer. Sports Illustrated's Pat Forde is joining us now for his weekly visit. And Pat, is always interested in your take on any big college football news. What do you make of Scott Frost coming back to Nebraska?
Quite frankly, I think Big Red's waving the white flag, Dave. I don't understand the move. You know, I didn't see certainly, you know, any great signs that Nebraska is ready to come close to winning the Big Ten West. 3-7, 1-6, 4th year on the job at a place where you're accustomed to winning big. Wow. I mean, that is, you're settling far below your historic standard here. And you can put up some numbers that say, yes, they have been close. You could also dig a little deeper into some of those box scores and see that they scored late touchdowns to make games look closer against Illinois, against Minnesota, against Purdue, and against Oklahoma. That's what made those 1-score games, were touchdowns in the last minutes of those games. I didn't ever really get the feeling Nebraska was going to win them. I was at the Illinois game. I was kind of appalled by what Nebraska looked like then, and I just don't think they've looked appreciably better. They were legitimately close against Michigan State. They were competitive against Ohio State. But as Coach Wanstead said in the previous segment there, how are you going to hire a new staff to come in and fix this thing and get people on board for this? I mean, you're going to have to throw around the money that you were reticent to throw around to buy out Scott Frost, and I think you're really just delaying your problems by a year.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, look, I believe there's more nuance to it than that, because I do think, I mean, if you won, Michigan State, I mean, you look at their crossover schedule. I mean, they played Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. I mean, replace those with Maryland, Indiana, and Rutgers, and maybe you're looking at things differently, and maybe you do make a bowl game this year. Although, to your point, look, they lost to Illinois. I mean, they lost some games in the division that perhaps you would argue they should have won. But I guess the flip side of that to me, Pat, is I just don't know that there's an obvious replacement. Like, if Scott Frost doesn't work, who's going to work there? And I think you have to give it every chance, particularly coming off an athletic director who, frankly, was very hands-off. I don't think was as involved as they needed him to be in the way that Trev is, didn't understand the place in the way that Trev does. I mean, I get it. If you're measuring it against Nebraska in 1995, then it's unfathomable that you'd bring him back. But is 1995 Nebraska realistic? Or are we talking more about, can you become 2021 Wisconsin, or can you become Iowa, or even, Northwestern's won 2 of the last 3 Big Ten West. Can you become a team that every once in a while has a good year and is certainly across the board far more competitive than Nebraska's been this year aside? I mean, those all seem realistic.
They do, if you got the right coach. I don't think Scott Frost is the right coach. He's had 4 years and he's done nothing. He's got a 4-year starting quarterback and he's 3-7. I just don't see any sign that says Scott Frost is going to do the job. And now the $20 million buyout could be a big reason to, try to just mitigate things another year. And that's the one area where I will give Nebraska some credit, because I've seen some nonsensical decisions made with money at a time when money is tight. They're at least being financially prudent. I don't know whether they're being competitively prudent. And no, they're not going to be Nebraska 1995 or 97, probably ever again. How about being Nebraska 2010 or 2009, at least, when you were winning 9 games? They're a long way from that, a long way.
Yep.
And you're looking around the rest of the division now, and I think you can make a case that as long as P.J. Fleck stays at Minnesota, they're going to be competitive. Certainly Iowa and Wisconsin are always going to be there. If Jeff Brom stays at Purdue, they're going to be dangerous. Illinois, I think, made a good hire. Pat Fitzgerald is Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. So I just don't see Scott Frost all of a sudden next year, or probably at any point in time, getting over the top of those teams.
We shall see. I mean, I think there are arguments to be made on either side. I do think it's interesting that Mitch Sherman said there generally was support to bring him back. So I think that tells you a little something about what's going on there locally and what people think and where they're putting their hopes. I do want to talk about the CFP. It comes out tonight. Michigan State's loss clearly was the biggest news this past weekend. How do you see that kind of shaking things up?
Yeah, it's obviously a damaging loss, but it doesn't end anything for Michigan State. All goals remain the same and intact. Now, you've got to win out. Obviously, you've got to win in the horseshoe. You got to beat Penn State. You got to beat Maryland. And the one thing we saw, obviously, is a pass defense that has become even more dramatically exposed. That was a bad matchup for them against a Purdue team that knows how to throw, catching them coming off the big emotional rivalry game on the road. The trap was there. They walked into the trap got them. But, I think they dropped probably to 6 or so in the playoff rankings. They don't fall, like the bottom doesn't fall out here. I think you still have to keep them ahead of Michigan, having beaten them head to head. You just got to regroup. You got to get better in the pass defense. You got to be able to, to eliminate mistakes offensively there. Kenneth Walker is still an effective player, but he's not. I don't know whether you're going to be able to get 197 and 5 touchdowns from him every week the way that you did against Michigan. So they've got to have a little more variety, I think, on offense, and then find ways to slow down people passing against them, because the remaining opponents can all throw.
It's no doubt they have a major flaw in the secondary. I don't think we're at the point now where you just can't debate it. Here's what's interesting, though, Pat. Kind of everyone other than Georgia has significant flaws, and we saw it in evidence this past weekend. Michigan State lost, as you said. Others came very close to losing, or certainly didn't play at the level you would expect. So you said Michigan State maybe down to 7 or so. Who do you see as the top 4 when it comes out tonight?
Yeah, I would say there's Georgia, and then everybody else has warts all over him. But, Georgia's number 1. I would say Oregon 2, Ohio State 3, Cincinnati 4. I have no idea whether the committee will agree with me. They probably won't because they liked Alabama more than I did last week. I would have Alabama 5 probably at this point. And 4 or 5, it's tough. I mean, Cincinnati was very unimpressive against Tulsa. If you put Alabama ahead of them, I'm not sure I would quibble. But, I think that, again, Michigan State's going to take that drop. Ohio State moves in, I think, and is in better position. Obviously, they'll sort it out on the field, but those two and Michigan will all certainly remain in the top 10.
And, of course, the beauty of it in the Big Ten is it doesn't really matter what they're ranked tonight because these teams are still all going to face one another, and we will see how it plays out, or at least, you've still got Michigan State, Ohio State, and Michigan. Michigan Wolverines captured their first Big Ten women's soccer title since 1999 on Sunday, knocking off number 1 seed Rutgers in Piscataway. Senior Raleigh Loughman scored the lone goal of the match, tallying about midway through the first half, a lead the Wolverines then made stand up. And so they earned a number 2 seed in the NCAA tourney, the highest in program history. They'll host Bowling Green in their opener. In all, 6 Big Ten teams made the tourney, the most for the conference since 2018. Rutgers earned a number 1 seed, first for the league since 2015. Also the first time since that year the conference has had 2 top 2 seeds. And so we go to our big interview and are joined by Raleigh Loughman. And Raleigh, congratulations. A huge game, obviously, with a Big Ten championship on the line. There was a tremendous crowd. What was it like to go into Rutgers and pull off that win?
Oh, it was just such an unbelievable experience. We had played them earlier in Piscataway and hadn't had the result that we wanted, so there was definitely a little bit of drive there coming out of our team for sure.
Take us through the game-winning goal.
Yeah, it was played out to Sammy Woods on the right flank, and I found myself in the 6, and she played a great little slip ball through, and I took a touch and just finished it. I was calm, cool, collected, and ready to go.
It's crazy to me to think that Michigan has not won a Big Ten women's soccer title, at least a tournament title, since 1999, just given how good this program has been year in and year out. I mean, it's not like it's a down-and-out program. What did it mean to get the monkey off your back?
Oh, it just felt unbelievable. Our team has been wanting, especially in my class, my senior class, has been wanting a title for at least our 4 years that we've been here. So it's just been an incredible feeling. And
of course, you lost in double overtime a couple of years ago to Penn State in the championship game. So how much had you kind of dwelled on that throughout your career and kind of thought about the possibility to make that right this weekend?
Yeah, that was definitely in the back of all the upperclassmen's minds. We actually lost at that field in Rutgers, so there was definitely in the back of our minds we had that, and we're like, we're not going to let this happen again.
I was looking through some of the stats. I noticed you are your team's leading scorer. You are 4th in shots taken. It would seem to me this would beg the question, why aren't you shooting more, Raleigh? To what do you attribute your ability, your knack to find the back of the net?
Yeah, I honestly have to give all the credit to my teammates. I just find myself at the right place at the right time, and they're the ones to feed me the ball and get me the ball, which has been really amazing.
You're a team that welcomed back nearly 100% of its minutes from a year ago, and so you talked about some of the upperclassmen on this team. There were a number of players who chose to come back for that extra year, that COVID year. How much did the continuity help this group in terms of you guys knowing one another so well on the field?
Oh, it definitely helped this group. I've been playing with some of these girls for at least 4 years now, and our team has a big emphasis on culture, and that's why you can see some of the 5th years that came back and just place such a big emphasis on the team, as Michigan likes to say. So it was really an amazing feeling.
When you talk about culture, I think we hear that thrown around a lot in sports. How do you define your team's culture? What's different about Michigan soccer?
Well, when you look at our team, there's not necessarily like the big name that you see on other teams, like a Sam Coffey or a Frankie Tagliaferri. So I think that when we come together and play the game that we can play, our culture and our commitment to that culture really shows through.
You are from San Diego. You were homeschooled What has the adjustment been like from being homeschooled to being at a massive university like Michigan?
Yeah, so it was definitely an adjustment at first. I mean, I stepped onto a campus with 40,000 people, so it was definitely a big adjustment going from being homeschooled, but I've loved it, and I wouldn't have changed it for the world.
What was the biggest adjustment? What was the thing where you were like, wow, this is a little different than being at the kitchen table?
Yeah, I would say my participation in class. I definitely have had to work on that throughout my 4 years, but just speaking in front of like 80, 90 people in a classroom has definitely been the biggest adjustment.
So you're a business major. I understand you have a job lined up for next year. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I recently accepted a job with Nike out in their Portland headquarters, working in their human resources division for next year.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So what's it going to be? Like, tell us what your job responsibilities are going to be as far as you know.
Yeah, so they haven't given me too much details yet, but I'm going to be a human resources specialist working in the headquarters, which will be really exciting.
Oh, that's really cool. All right, so you get to keep your hand in the sports world a little bit. I know before you get to that, though, you want to win a national championship. So let's talk about this first game against Bowling Green. Interestingly, you already played Bowling Green this year and beat them 2-1. So what did you learn in that game, which was a close game? I mean, it was 1-1, second half, until you guys got the game winner. What did you learn in that game that you can carry forward to this matchup?
Yeah, we always place the biggest amount of respect on Bowling Green. We've played them a few times throughout my career here, so they're definitely a hard team to beat, and it's gonna be a good game on Friday. I'm excited about it.
Style-wise, what do they do that might cause you some problems?
They have a really good offensive line up top, so we definitely need to keep an eye on that, but I'm sure our amazing back line will be able to handle it.
All right, Raleigh, we're really looking forward to it. Congratulations on all your success at Michigan, and can't wait to see how this plays out, not just for you, but for the entire Big Ten in this women's soccer tourney.